What is the scariest or creepiest thing you've seen or heard? Story 1. So, a while back when my mom lived in this house on Brindley Mountain, the landlord to the place was super anal about making sure they did no remodeling or repairs. He wanted nothing changed. It was odd to say the least. After a while, my mom and stepdad started saying they think the place was haunted by the ghost of a small girl. They said sometimes they would see the shadow of a girl walk from one room to the other, or hear playing in the back when nobody was back there. And sometimes it sounded like a small child was sobbing, but couldn't tell where from. So, me being an atheist at the time kind of blew it off. I was like, yeah, right, huh. So, anyway, this was towards the end of me and my now ex wife's relationship. When we split up, I started living with my mom until I got on my feet. We shared custody of our daughter 50-50. So one week, she'd stay with me until Friday, and then she'd go to her house until the following Friday, and then she'd come back to me. Simple, right? Anyway, it was Saturday night, and I was on the computer. It's probably like 2 in the morning, so I'm just surfing music. The computer desk was in the kitchen facing a wall, and on that wall was the doorway that led to the bedrooms. So, if anyone came out of bed to get something from the kitchen, then they would walk right past me. My little girl was always getting up in the night and getting into trouble. She'd raid the fridge or knock something over, climbing up on something. She liked to get up in the middle of the night and raid the kitchen because she knew everyone was asleep and she could get away with it. So, this particular night, I happened to be up and on the computer. I see my daughter sneak into the kitchen with my peripheral vision, and she froze when she saw me and just stood there. I didn't look at her or pay her attention. I figured she had seen me, she knows she's caught, and hopefully she will go back to bed and go to sleep without me having to make a big deal out of it. So she stands there for about 3 minutes. I can see her the whole time, but I make a point not to look at her so she would just go back to bed. She eventually turns and walks back towards the bedroom. It was dark in the room, but I could still see her turn and leave. Everything was dead silent after that. So, after about 15 minutes, I got that feeling in my gut that all parents get when their kids are too quiet, and decided I needed to go check on her because she's probably up to no good. In 15 minutes, I should have heard her climb back in bed or rustle through toys. I stood up and walked into the room that led to the bedrooms, and it was pitch black. Couldn't see a thing. I stopped dead in my tracks. The hair on my neck stood up, and I got a sick, sick feeling in my stomach. And that's when it hit me. My daughter was with her mother that night, not with me. It still gives me chills to think about. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the first story. I just wanted to pause here to give a trigger warning. There will be talk of self harm and unaliving. If it's in your best interest to stop listening now, please do so. The next stories are interesting and equally creepy. So if you're okay, please listen on. Thanks. Story 2. I worked at two hospitals, placement, during my last year of college. At one hospital, I worked with professionals that did therapeutic play with children on the pediatric ward, as well as on the adolescent psych ward at the other hospital. My boss and I would do crafts, projects, art, etc. with the teens to help them have an outlet while they were getting treatment for mental illness, addiction issues, and other medical issues. Each day, before we would see the teens, we would get a rundown from the nurses on the ward explaining who everyone was, what issues they were being hospitalized for, and any other info we needed. This could include anything from a warning that the patient had violent tendencies, how they are adjusting to being on the ward, which patients they did or did not get along with, etc. So, this one night, we were given the usual rundown of the teens on the ward, and the nurse mentioned one teen in particular. This girl, I will call her Sally, obviously not her real name, had all of a sudden just stopped talking one day and started to act really out of character. She would not respond to family, friends, siblings, doctors, or anyone for that matter. She was hospitalized because they became concerned about her harming herself, and they were definitely trying to ensure that she was being watched 24/7, just in case she was experiencing some type of psychosis. I don't know a ton of details because we were just given a quick rundown of the patient's case. From what I was told, they had checked and ruled out a brain tumor and other possible psychological causes and found nothing abnormal. Now, just to set the stage, this hospital is a very old hospital with dark hallways, poorly lit rooms, and the coldest, most creepy atmosphere I have ever experienced. In every way, it looked like a hospital you would see in a horror movie. And when walking down the hallways, I remember always being scared something would jump out at me, just because there were a lot of blind spots due to its very old layout. Anyways, this night in particular, my coworker slash boss and I started the crafts and activities for the kids in the kitchen room where we always did our activities. I was sitting close to Sally and tried to initiate conversations, but she would just stare blankly. My boss slash coworker tried as well, and Sally would not respond. And without warning, she would just occasionally look at us and laugh loudly or smile at me with glossy eyes. The doctors had tried all day to get her to speak, and she said nothing. So I just chatted and tried my best to include her, even though she wouldn't really engage. I started to doodle on a piece of paper while talking with some of the teens and just randomly wrote down, "Hi," and drew around it, not even really thinking about what I was doing. Almost immediately after I wrote "Hi," Sally picked up a pencil and wrote "Hello." I was shocked to say the least. I was the first person in days and days that she attempted to communicate with. I didn't know if it would work, but I wrote, "How are you?" And she actually wrote an answer. I was blown away. After Sally and I exchanged a couple of questions slash answers, my coworker noticed what was going on, so she kept the other teens busy and just nodded at me to keep going. Within a few minutes, this girl and I had written almost a page of conversation, and she was communicating through writing with no trouble. I couldn't believe it was happening. I was getting all this info from a girl that everyone thought was unreachable. We talked through writing for what seemed like hours, but was probably just about 1 hour. And while I was asking her about how she was feeling, about being in the ward, she admitted through writing that she was scared. I pressed on, trying to see if she was scared because she was in a strange place or missed her family, etc. But she wrote it was because she saw people in the room with us. Obviously, there were people in the room with us, so I asked her why the people in the room scared her, and she simply wrote, "They are dead." I swear when I read it, I felt like my stomach hit the floor. I looked up from the page we were writing on, and she just looked at me and then turned her head and stared at the door. No one was there. Well, at least I didn't see anyone there. Sally stared at the door for easily a full minute, and I swear she saw something there. I was more scared than I would even express. I will never forget the look on her face. Whether or not there was a person slash ghost there, Sally could see someone. I took some deep breaths, and once I had her attention again, we started communicating again through writing. We talked this way until about 9 p.m. when I had to leave with my coworker. I thanked Sally for speaking to me, and she seemed a lot more aware when I said goodbye. She was still not verbalizing, but I know that the doctors were doing their best to find out why. I collected the papers we had written on, and before leaving the ward, I showed them to my coworker and the nurse in charge. Everyone on duty, the nurses, etc., were dumbfounded that I had actually communicated with her, and they assured me that the pages would be passed along to the psychiatrist the next morning. I was filled with so many emotions. I was happy I had spoken to her and she was honest with me, but I was also incredibly scared and shaken up. My coworker dropped me off at home, and I remember walking into the living room, and my roommates knew immediately that something had happened. I was shaking and blurted out everything that happened. They were supportive, but also freaked out by the situation. I have never been happier to have roommates because if I had gone home to an empty place, I probably wouldn't have slept for days. Sadly, because of the schedule I had and the many different shifts at the hospital, I never saw Sally again. No one knew what the final diagnosis was for her. I still get chills when I think about the look on her face that night when she stared at the door. I don't think I will ever shake that feeling. I just hope she got the help she needed. Story 3. I was in one of those wards for issues with chemical dependency when I was 17. All of the other kids in the ward had those issues too. One new girl came in. We'll call her Jess, obviously not real. When she first showed up, she slept/stayed in her room for 2 days. On the third day, she came out and would just freaking stare at me. I was creeped out, but most of those kids were pretty weird, myself included. So I just kind of let it go. When we finished one of our sessions, I decided to stay and work on an assignment they had given me about my control issues or something. One of those dumb worksheets asking questions like, why do you feel you need to be in control? What are you afraid would happen if you let go of your control? And so on. I've been working on the assignment alone in the room for about 5 minutes, and I swear to God, nobody was there when suddenly 2 hands slapped down on the armrest on my chair, and there's Jess staring the freak out of me. She looked scared crapless, but so confident at the same time. I nearly crapped myself and jumped out of my chair. She slowly leans into me, and I'm like, what the heck? Is this girl trying to kiss me? Then she passes my face, so close our cheeks rubbed against each other. A shiver ran down my spine, and I tried to stay calm. I didn't move. She put her lips by my ear and whispered, they're watching you. She stayed there for a good 5 seconds, then slowly pulled away and walked out of the room without looking back. I nearly fainted. I got the heck out of the room and finished my assignment in a well-lit hallway. The next day, one of my supervisors asked if I had given my assignment to someone else after I turned it in. I asked why she thought that, and she showed me my paper. A few questions in, my handwriting noticeably changed. I didn't know if I was shaking or what, but it looked like I tried writing lefty. It was so distinctly different and unrecognizable to me. I told her what happened, and I wasn't sure if I should have or not, but she thanked me and probably told someone else about it. Everything was normal for the next few days. Jess came out of hiding and acted like a totally reasonable person. I would still catch her staring at me now and then, but not the way she had initially. My last night in the ward, stuff got messed up. On top of chemical dependency issues, the ward was for mental issues or depression. So they had supervisors awake around the clock who would open each room door to check on us literally every 10 minutes. For someone who has trouble sleeping like I do, this was hell. Right when I feel myself falling asleep, boom, blinding light from the hallway. The lights outside were left on all night, and the supervisors would hang out there talking. There was a girl side and a boy side, and they congregated between the two. Anyway, it was my last night. The door opened a crack, and it usually closes shortly after they see if we're awake or sleeping and if we're okay. This time, it didn't. It opened slowly, enough for someone to enter, and then shut quietly. I thought it was weird, but I didn't see anyone come in, so I just tried to sleep. Within seconds, I felt warm air against my neck. I rolled over and almost screamed. Jess was lying next to me, breathing heavily. I hadn't even felt her crawl into the bed. Creepier still is that she was completely under the covers with me. Holy crap. I felt like we laid in silence staring at each other for 10 minutes, but it was probably more like 30 seconds. I tried to ask what she wanted, but only a croaking sound came out. I literally could not speak. It was like my vocal cords had been ripped out. She smiled at me, which was scary as heck. Then she put a finger to my lips and goes, "They're coming." Same whisper voice as before. I almost fell out of bed and had to catch myself against the wall. I lost focus for a moment. I regained my composure almost immediately, just in time to catch the door closing. Her being in my room was virtually impossible. The hallway was monitored at all times, and boys and girls were not even allowed to touch each other, much less be in the same room. There were significant penalties for these actions. To this day, I have no idea how she made it over undetected. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I laid there, staring at the door as the midnight checks resumed like normal. As I left, I said goodbye to the friends I made, and she was the last person I saw. We locked eyes for about 10 seconds, and for the first 7 or 8, she just stood there, staring, stony faced, saying nothing. Then, the last couple seconds, she smiled eerily and nodded. She winked at me and promptly walked away. Last story. I was on vacation in Ithaca with my boyfriend at the time. We had literally, I'm talking 10 minutes, just gotten into town and stopped at a suspension bridge near Cornell's campus. I'm terrified of heights, and so my boyfriend was coaxing me step by step over the bridge. It was gorgeous, and we stopped at the middle to take a picture. On the side we had come from, there was a parking lot with steps leading to the bottom of the gorge, but on the far side, there were hiking paths with no barrier. A woman walked past us and offered to take a picture for us. We declined, and she smiled and walked quickly to the far side of the bridge, where she smoothly jumped off into the gorge. There was not a second of hesitation. It was almost like she expected the path to keep going. The sound of a person hitting the ground from a jump like that, it sticks with you. Thanks for listening to the end. That last one was incredibly unsettling. I think one of the eeriest parts is the girl seems so at peace. And they say once people make the decision to unalive themselves, they're usually quite airy/happy with the weight of all their issues lifted off. That makes me want to take a moment here to remind everyone to not only check in with their friends and family, but also check in with yourselves. Our well being is often more important than we realize, so please reach out. So many people want to help. On that note, I hope you have a really good day today. You truly do deserve it.